interesting that that's happening today because a couple weeks ago, our first song refused to play. We had the words on the screen, but we didn't have music. And so, mostly led by our illustrious Samuel here,
Unless we become like little children.
I think of you a lot as I wrote this, in a good way. But anyway, we all affirmed the words of the song that were on the screen, and it was really wonderful. You know, it was a community event. There was no fussing about it. It just spontaneously happened. And that's the genius of a childlike spirit that we're talking about today. So that was a couple weeks ago, and around that same time, I got this little whisper from Spirit about the words from Matthew chapter 18. I don't like this passage. I'm going to tell you about that. But the whole passage is chapter 18, verses 1 through 4. At the time the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Unless you become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." So that was what was playing in my mind. Whoever humbles himself like this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Well, before we go further, let me just clarify that in Unity, we don't really talk so much about heaven. We certainly don't talk about hell. I imagine many of us have had times when we felt that we experienced heaven or hell. Sometimes we feel all this peace and joy as if we can't even hold it all. And sometimes we feel completely abandoned and in grief and pain, and we feel like we couldn't make it through. So we've experienced those states of mind. But when we're talking, especially in Unity, in this verse about unless you become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven, we're not referring to a place. We're referring to a new dimension of consciousness, a full realization of our oneness with the creative power of God, and a willingness to use that oneness as the basis for all our choices and beliefs. That's becoming like a child. The kingdom of God or heaven in this reference is descriptive of the state of consciousness we will achieve when we're fully expressing our innate oneness with God through the Christ of our being. It is an eternal spiritual consciousness, as we are eternal. And it's not something we achieve after we die. It's not something we're working for out there. It's something we're working to experience now. Not easy, but that's our goal. It is eternal. You can't limit the eternal, and you can't define it when it begins or ends. It is the kingdom of heaven. That higher consciousness of oneness is now and always will be. It's an immediate possibility. So let's go back to the Bible reference from Matthew. Christ is directing his disciples that they must become like little children in order to move into this state of consciousness. What does that really mean? Most of my life, as I indicated earlier, I've been very resistant to this teaching. I was the youngest of 5 children with a 21-year age split between the oldest and the youngest. And they teased me mercilessly until I cried. And then they said, "All you ever do is cry." To this day, my 89-year-old brother sees me and says, "All you ever did was cry." So all I've ever wanted to do was grow up, and be like my brothers and my sister, and I think I wanted a certain, respect and status that I thought came with that. But now I can see a different way. So when I hear that instruction, I cringe a little bit. Become like a little child. And I want to explore what Jesus really meant when he gave us that direction. So I started focusing on the qualities that I've seen children display that would bring us closer to expressing the state of consciousness of heaven. What can we learn from the little ones? First, I begin to think about their openness as opposed to our walls and our judgment. If I meet each person with curiosity, I'm open. I'm open to hear new ways of thinking about things. My daughter Kim, at the age of 11, listened as I attempted to apologize for cursing in front of her. Her immediate response at age 11 was, "I don't think it matters much which words you used. The important thing is you got your feelings out." It gives me chills still. She knew something innately that I had not learned, and she taught me in that moment. She was devoid of judgment about the words that I used, and she saw behind it just a need for me to release energy. Then, I always get choked up when I talk about Rowan, but just this week, as if he knew that he could help me, he was trying to clarify something with his mom. And their household isn't, an especially spiritual one. We raise them in unity, but they don't go to church and they don't take the kids to Sunday school, and that's fine. They're very good people, and that's what matters to me. So the most influence they get on anything spiritual is Grampy or Graham leading everybody in a prayer before a meal. Mostly Thanksgiving or, special occasions. But I was actually at their house this week for dinner, and Rowan initiated the prayer. But I heard that later he was talking to his mom, and he was very insistent on trying to clarify the point. He said, "Mom, there's really two gods, isn't there?" And Caitlin said, "Well, Rowan, there's lots of people that believe a lot of different things about God." And he said, "Yeah, but really, truth is, there's two gods. There's the one when you're angry and you say, 'Oh, God.' And then there's the one when you feel blessed and you say, 'Thank you, God.'" 5. He's 5. So I don't agree with two gods, but he sure gave me something to think about. His mind is open to all the possibilities, and that's something that we see in children. And maybe as he matures, he'll expand that thinking to know that God can contain the angry and the grateful, like we know that, right? But anyway, he in that moment when I heard that story taught me something. He has no issues with two gods existing. The important part is that he could see the possibility of two opposite things existing in the same loving space, and they don't oppose one another. Children often show us a more unlimited view of possibility. I was talking to a friend this week, and I told her the story of Rowan, and she related to me that her grandsons, who were also not raised in a household where they were taken to church or Sunday school, had taught her a few things. Her husband had passed away, and her 5-year-old at that time, they're grown now, grandson said to her, "I talk to Grandpa Chuck all the time." And she asked him how he did that. And he said, "You just ask. You just ask God, and he'll let you talk to him." That same child said, after moving to a new city, he told his mom, I visit Sam all the time. That was his best friend where he used to live. And she said, really? How? And he said, I just fly at night. These children, I just, chills go from the top of my head to my toes. They just have an open mind. Anything is possible. How could we benefit with a more open mind instead of the narrow thinking that keeps us from fear, keeps us from criticism? All these things can exist within the love of God. So another quality that I've observed in children that are raised in a reasonably safe environment is trust. And even if we weren't raised in a reasonably safe environment, as adults, we can choose to foster trust in our lives. If we become as little children, we nurture ourselves in the trust of the divine. It holds us and allows us to expand, knowing in truth that we are safe. We are held in deep and all-providing love. When we feel safe, then we can explore and express the promptings of our heart, especially those that might seem logically risky. And also, we can face challenges that seem that they could devastate us. We can face those when we feel and are rooted in the trust that we can learn and we can come to know as we create a relationship with the divine. There's a beautiful series of books that are popular right now written by Kobe Yamada. And they ask different questions and then they answer them with solutions that are open to possibility. It's a children's series, but I love it. I would love it. I would love you to read it. Some of the titles are, What Do You Do with an Idea? What Do You Do with a Chance? What Do You Do with a Problem? Each of these help children and adults, as I said, explore the possibilities in each of those circumstances. Maybe possibilities that we hadn't thought of. They're wonderful teaching tools. So the answers that he gives display imagination and openness and trust that I feel that we're talking about when we seek to discover the childlike qualities that we can foster. So, for example, in What Do You Do with the Problem? We see the child has this problem and he didn't like it. It's this sort of gray mass and he tries to run away from it. He tries to ignore it. He tries to cover it up, but it just gets bigger. Finally, he gets frustrated and turns and faces it. And he says, why are you here? And the problem reveals to him that within it is a brilliant opportunity. So when he turns and actually faces the problem, he learns what the opportunity is. We all have problems in our lives. And I am of the mind sometimes of burying my head in the sand. But I'm learning. And this simple book was a great demonstration. For example, when I made the decision to go to seminary, the urge had been in my heart for something like 20 years. But I couldn't open myself to the possibility that I could afford to do that. But I had a lovely friend who said, why don't you just look at it and start taking some steps? And even to this day, I can't tell you how that all unfolded. But I began to take the steps, and the money showed up. And I ended up with no debt. I ended up fulfilling a dream that I'd had for a long time. And I ended up learning that if we take a step and another step, sometimes we find out, no, this isn't where I wanted to go. But sometimes, many times, we learn that we are supported in that decision from our heart. And you can learn that big dreams like moving from Ohio to Colorado can happen. I was fully supported in ways I couldn't. My brother that I hadn't really talked to for years said, I'll take you, I'll move you. And he did, and he paid all the expenses. I can't believe it to this day, but I do believe it, and I accept it. And I say thank you. I'm sure. I'm sure. At one point, he said to me, "You can stop saying thank you already." He's kind of a hard ass, you know. Is it important that I get the feeling out? Thank you. But I mean, he's 3 years older than me, and he was the one that made me cry the most. It was like his life mission to make me cry. And he says now, "I'm sorry I treated you that way." But it took 60 years for that to happen. I never foresaw that it could happen, but it has, and I'm grateful. So the important thing is that when you follow something in your heart, when you know that prompting is moving you. I'm sorry, I forgot we had a child here.
I think he's heard that before.
Do you think? Anyway, the important thing is that when you know in your heart, you feel that from within, that push, take a step, and let the universe support you. Albert Einstein, I think we look at him as one of our greatest minds. He advised this: if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. All we have talked about so far this morning is evident. That's evident if we look closely at the wisdom that he gives us. We've talked about believing in unlimited possibilities. Fairy tales tell stories of unlimited thinking. Anything can fly. Things appear as if from nowhere. And openness to those endless possibilities allows them to come to us. The boundaries that we believe exist in our world melt away in fairy tales. Qualities of spirit that seem impossible appear in creatures great and small, and our imagination is expanded beyond its former limits. This is what I believe the Divine Creator wants for us, to know our unlimited being right here and now, in the midst of this seemingly limited world. So I invite you, experiment with these qualities of childlike wonder. Take a step onto that path. I'm talking to the choir here, right? We see Samuel do that all the time. He leads us in this. So you're stepping into unlimited potential, unlimited love, and everything is there for you in that expanded consciousness of heaven. And my final guide for you this morning is to encourage you to read this book. It's another one by Kobe Yamada. It might be his newest one. It's called Maybe. It's a story about the endless potential in all of us. The inside flyleaf gives us this peek at what's inside. It says, "You are the only you there has ever been or will ever be. You are unique. Just the odds of you being here at this exact place and this exact time are so great and so rare that it will never happen again. This is a story for everything you will do and everything you could be. It's for you, who you are right now, and it's for all the magical, unbounded potential you hold inside. Even though we're not children, all of us, just one of us is. Oh, maybe two. We have potential. We haven't gone everywhere we're supposed to go yet, or we wouldn't be sitting here. So this book encourages us to open. I was once given this message in meditation. It said, "Emerge now. You have legions around you loving you. It's safe. The time for fear and hiding is over. Emerge. The world needs the beauty that you are. Emerge." Emerge, my friends, in all love. Namaste.